Welcome to our 55th podcast. Today we'll be talking about leveraging play with intentionality as a strategy for growth and innovation with our very special guest, Rachel Kaberon. What's the one thing you can do now to engage your organization in profitable play? Keep listening to find out.
Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants Rich Cruz, Ben Kleinman, and Cheryl Volpe to explore, challenge, and build on various organizational culture and change management concepts. It's a blend of theory and practice based on their personal and professional experiences working with companies of all sizes across various industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want new ideas about the corporate environment, or just want to listen to a group of consultants talking about how to make work more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces.
Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. As always, we're so glad to have you with us today. I'm Rich Cruz, an organizational development consultant, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, Cheryl Volpe. Hi, Cheryl.
Hey, Rich. Hi, everyone.
And Ben Kleinman.
Hi, everyone.
And today we have a very special guest with us. We have Rachel Kaberon. Hey, Rachel, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank
Welcome.
Welcome.
you.
So Rachel is a strategist and is coming to us. It's so weird. We were just mentioning how this happened. So we were connected through Rahi, right? And Rahi is a friend of mine through IMC USA, and which is the first acronym of the day, first of all. And second of all, the Institute of Management Consultants in the USA. But he's in Canada. So our connection goes from Chicago to Canada and back to this area.
And what's even more interesting is that it's Terry Flanagan who brought Rahi into my orbit. And actually, it's how, and Rich knows Terry. So, Terry and I have been, I don't want, we're collegial without being collaborators. I mean, we have been talking to each other for over a decade about different problems, but not actually worked on. That's not true. There are some things he helped me do, some events I used to do for the MIT Enterprise Forum when I was organizing some events. And, it's as consultants and as independents, we often have to rely on other people's expertise in a field or their knowledge of different people, right, to help us navigate whatever situation we're working on. So Terry is one of those people, and we kind of troubleshoot for each other often. And Rahi and I are working on a project now together.
That's great. Well, yeah, he is the quintessential collaborator for sure. So Rachel, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Okay, so I have I'm what many people call a interdisciplinarian. So when I graduated from graduate school, my degree was in public policy, and at the time there weren't a lot of people with a master's degrees in public policy, and particularly it got fused with a lot of people in administration, and that's a very different, very different thing. And I took my stats in the business school, and being horrified to do so, I surprised myself and my colleagues because it became my major. So uncertainty under decision making was sort of something I understood and began to get really excited about. And that really informed my entire career after that. I forecasted elections and went to New York, and then ended up in banking of all places, and working in innovation in banking. So banking in the 80s in the credit card world was actually the world of innovation. You wouldn't know it today, but it was that.
That's
And so a lot of the model building, like about AI today. Oh, here comes the sun. Let's hope I don't get bleached out. The the model building and the kinds of models that people are using artificial intelligence to do with data and predictive algorithms are the kinds of things I was playing with in the 80s in banking.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I did not keep up with all my tech and code over the last 30 years. But I did keep up with the trends of what organizations were doing, what with those kinds of algorithms. And transformational change is sort of at the precipice of all of that work because you're introducing a new idea into an organization. And then you have to get the organization to kind of completely change how they're organized to be able to um, incorporate that productivity and that
Mm.
work style and that decision making. And at the end of the
Sure.
day, the decisions that get made, who make them, for whom they are made, makes a very big difference on who they help.
Makes
Rachel.
sense.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I don't want to derail you, but my question is this. Is it a requirement that you have transformational leaders? This is a leadership style, transformation leaders.
Yeah.
Can you make transformative change without having leaders that understand transformational leadership?
So this is really a great question, and I don't really have an answer. I will admit. Um, for a lot of the circles that I play in, and they play because I am not a professional in the human resources world, but I play in that world. I am not
Mhm.
I'm not an IT leader, but I play in that world. There's even organizational change. I'm not an organizational change leader, but I play in that world. So because as I said, my expertise is in that weird kind of space. So it is absolutely true that if you don't know anything, it is very difficult for you to be informed in making a decision. So if you don't understand what transformation is, it's
Mm.
really hard to lead it. Okay. And
Right.
there are a lot of people who will then turn around and quickly say, oh, well, but servant leaders are about enabling their people. Well, that's such a
Yeah.
that's such a lame excuse, okay? Because servant leaders, that's not really what a servant leader is, right? That's not what a servant leader is. And secondly, there are many more forms of leadership than hierarchical or servant. Most people they don't think about all the rest. And a
Sure.
transformational leader, first of all, in my view, any leader who fails to have a vision can't lead.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Fascinating.
one of
Here,
the
Yeah, we've
things
talked about yeah, we talked about that before for sure. Yeah.
so
We
if
how do you
you
adjust
don't
oh,
have a vision of what transformation you're trying to make happen,
mhm.
then how could you be a transformational leader?
thank
How's
Sure.
you.
that an
That's a
answer?
that's a great answer. That's exactly what I was speculating. You need to have that. You need to have that vision. Ben, were you going to say something? Because I have many more questions, but
Yeah, I
I
was just curious,
asked.
I was curious, Rachel, if you've had experience where you have a leader who has a vision, but that doesn't necessarily align with the vision of other leaders within that organization, and how you sort of manage to adjust those different visions and help them all kind of come to some sort of agreement on what the vision should be.
So the question then becomes, where did the vision come from? What's it based in?
Mm,
So, um, very early in my career, I I kind of hit upon most people are familiar, or maybe not. Maybe they're not familiar with the idea of people, process, and planet. The three P's, right? So there were lots of people in different decades who put this thesis together. And so those are all, literal principles. Like, what's the principle behind your organization? Not the principal, not the person, but the actual fundamentals. Like, why did this
sure.
organization come to be? What's it stand for? What is its raison d'etre? Why doesn't it exist? Right? So if you don't have a reason to exist, then you may as well join any other organization or be doing something else, right?
Right.
So that those principles become the core of any vision for the leader of that organization, because the principles of an organization really don't change. Your
Mm,
strategies better align with it. And the leader's job is to get everything else to align to those principles. And the vision statements are designed to be able to bring that alignment, help understand taste, touch, feel, smell, know, uh, appreciate the value of those principles,
sure.
and holding fast
Yeah.
to them.
Makes
That's
sense.
okay.
Makes sense.
That's
But you'll see organizations, what do they have? They have a mission statement, and then they have a vision statement. So
Hmm.
where do you find the principles? Where do they exist? Where do they reside?
That's a good point. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, you have mentioned play. I play in this, I play in that several times. And I know in our discussion, we were talking about using play in the workplace, right? Can we come back and talk a little bit about that? Awesome. Look forward to it. We'll be right back. Dysfunctional organizational cultures and poorly managed transformations can devastate employee morale and motivation, leading to disengaged employees, poor work quality, and the loss of your best people. The impacts to your organization include high costs, low productivity, and wasted resources. At Harmonious Workplaces, our purpose is to help you build the best workplace possible. We are advisors applying proven organizational development and industrial organizational psychology methodologies to help you become your best organization. We are doers, using time-tested principles to help you execute organizational change initiatives smoothly and successfully. To discover how Harmonious Workplaces can impact your organization, visit www.harmoniousworkplaces.com and book a free 30-minute information session with one of our consultants today. Again, that's www.harmoniousworkplaces.com. And we're back. So we have been talking with our special guest, Rachel Kaberon. And when we were just before the break, we were talking about organizations need to ground their mission and vision in principles, right? And so that's, I guess when we left, it's a little fuzzy for us on the principle side of things. Um, so let me ask this, because one of the things that we've talked about before is organizational culture. And we've brought up the Edgar Schein model of kind of the iceberg, or sometimes it's like an inverted triangle, but it talks about that an organization starts with these baseline assumptions. It has, from the assumptions, the values that stem from that, and then after that are the artifacts or the behaviors and outward signs and symbols that represent those assumptions and values. Is it that values level that we're talking about here on the principle side?
So actually, the way you've just described it, um, the thread through from the bottom to the top, the
Mhm.
principles. So, so the things that you're assuming are often principled. They're the deep rooted, foundation,
Sure.
right?
Mhm.
And then they get articulated as values and they get recognized as behaviors. Because there's a lot of
Got it.
things that we
Yeah.
value that we don't
Mm,
necessarily translate into behaviors, right? And there's
Mhm.
always that thing that's in your gut that you, you don't know what that is, right? But you recognize it as something important, right? And if you say that your value is that, oh, we only do what's important, it doesn't kind of it doesn't kind of
Right.
translate into anything, right? Because
Sure.
it is
yeah.
that it's so gut, foundational that you haven't articulated. So there are lots of I spend a lot of time talking to founders and startups, and it is very clear that when you meet a lot of founders, they have an idea, and their idea about comes from the fact that they've seen something that they would like to see changed, right? Or that they
Right.
Mhm.
believe they know the answer of how to change it, right? And
Mhm.
when you ask them more about, like they couldn't identify the principles that they have for their organization yet because they have this idea that they want to bring into the world. And so the principles themselves, you have to really, like I don't want to use that analogy. I was just thinking about a dentist. I don't want to go there. But like a gardener has to sometimes dig kind of deep, right? To
Right.
find, you know, the root. To, find out where what's really going on for you. Like how did you come to this? And what's interesting is that it's so unconscious for a lot of people, the principles,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Yep.
If you have any sense of an identity, a lot of times your identity could be, you know, a sports team, right? You don't think about the principle of the sport team, right? That doesn't come to mind when you identify with the sports team, right?
Sure.
You
Sure.
identify with the winning, or you identify with players who you enjoy, in their performance, but you don't identify with the principles of the sport team. But
Sure.
many, but the sports teams have some serious principles, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, they
Yeah.
can't hold cohesion of the team. They can't do a lot of other things. So I think
Right.
it's sort of important to help people and remind them of those principles. And the question is, what's the best way to remind them?
Mhm.
Is the vision the right way to remind them? Is our value statements the way to remind them? Or is it just, that care behavior to
Mhm.
remind?
Mhm. Sure. Well,
And
I like
I
it.
I don't really have answers for that. I don't have answers, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I get
And
that.
and I would like to add to that. Thank you, Rachel. Without that consistency, there's no brand or reputation. Also, with the sports team, it's a sports team. It's entertainment. They're athletes. There's a certain expectation there. But with companies that have other kinds of missions and value propositions, those ideas have to be consistent Everyone at the company needs to understand them, especially the leaders. And that becomes the basis of your brand and reputation so that people can know what it is you brought into the world, right?
Hmm.
So what's very interesting is in the strategy
Mhm.
lane, your principles are um, a, literally your point of decision, like what it is that you're going to do and not do, what's in scope, what's not in scope. On the
Mhm.
brand side, you want to make sure that you're appealing to your audience, right?
Right.
So,
Sure.
in many ways, the audience, as their values shift, y- you can often see brands trying to, oh, well,
Keep up.
we agree. We're like you. You should like us. We support the same thing you do. Right. And it's
Mhm.
that wishy washy slope, okay, that gets a lot of brands in trouble.
That makes sense.
Great.
It's a
Yeah.
lot of brands in trouble
So,
because that's why
so
we
you
have
got
washing in the world. That's why we have, all sorts of things, right? Because
sure.
they're trying to be things that they can't be at their core.
Right. Right. So you bring up two things now that we kind of opened up our discussion with, that I'd like to explore more. Right. Like, let's start it now. And then when we come back from our break in just a couple of minutes, we'll continue. But you talked about intentionality just now, right? Being intentional. And then you talked about play, you brought in sports. So can you talk a little bit about how we can leverage play intentionally and like kind of differentiate that between like just fun and something that's more like purposeful play in the business context?
Yeah. So there's an author that I really love. His name is James Carse. Um, it's with a C-A-R-S-E, I believe.
Okay.
And he wrote a book called Finite and Infinite Games. So
Okay.
if so that's the construct that I often use because most people when they think about playing game, they think about a bounded game. And
Right.
the
Right.
bounded game is like a board, right? A crossword puzzle has bounded because it's bounded, right? Uh in in the sports world, literally the game that you're playing that is competitive has a start and a stop time, right? The rules. It has the field of play. It has, everything about the rules. So the reason those boundaries exist is to define something very simply, which is who wins,
Hmm.
who wins.
Right.
Because so there are lots of people who believe that, and there's a lot of, silly bumper stickers that says, at the end of your life, the people with the most, right? Or it's like, what does that mean?
Yeah. Yep.
What
For sure.
what if you won? Right? Right. The game of life people talk about, right? So what I want to make sure that people recognize is that there are also infinite games, that the idea of an infinite game is that you want to keep play alive. You want to keep the engagement going. So, when the dog doesn't, comes to you with the ball in their, space, right? They want to play
Hmm.
catch and they just want you to play catch forever.
Never.
That dog will
There's no
never
end.
tire. You will tire of playing catch before the dog, right? That's always true. Um, Children, as and this is actually what Harth uses as his example, is they're like they're doing make believe, they're role playing, they're taking on all sorts of different posture kinds of things because they're trying lots of things out. They're not trying to be great at anything. They're just trying out for the sake of, like, what does this feel like? What is that like? And they
Yeah.
want to just keep playing together. So the idea is just to keep so that, mom calls and says, "Hey, time for dinner." You go in, right? And then you can pick up the play tomorrow, the same place, right? You
Makes
don't,
that makes
it
perfect
doesn't
sense.
change, right?
Right.
So what's interesting is that in the workplace, people recognize that you can play games, but they're all very short duration. Nobody really thinks about what it means to be continue in play. And maybe this is a semantic thing. I really like it not to be, because there are lots of people who are, like relays, you know, a relay sport. When you pass the baton, somebody's continuing to run the race. At work, your shift ends, the assembly line's still going,
Mhm.
taking on the relay position, right? Um,
Right.
in a collaborative meeting in which we assign tasks, right? Somebody says you do, you're going to be the note taker, and I'm going to be this, and you're going to go get the research, and then I'll write the paper, right? Or whatever they decide to do, right? Is that play? No, that's just collaboration. But if you want to be a good collaborator, playing together is fundamental, because what happens in play that doesn't often happen in other organization settings i- is trust. What happens when you meet people for the first time? You're sizing them up in any
Sure.
number of ways. You're sizing them up. You're kind of saying, uh, "Do I like this person? I like this person. Would they be open to my idea?
Right.
You know, uh, would they speak language? Do they understand me?" There, you name it. All that is in
Yeah.
your head. It's not happening over there,
Sure.
right? If they're doing. But if you say, "Hey, let's just play catch," you don't care.
Right. Right.
None of that
It's pretty low
matters.
stakes. Yeah, it's low stakes to play catch,
For
Or
sure.
or the corporate
catch the
equivalent
ball,
of catch. Yeah,
catch the ball and throw it back. That's the whole thing. Yeah.
but it
And
builds. So that's
so
really interesting. That play is the way to build trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's right.
Can we
It
can we do
cuts
this?
through, and then you can do all sorts of other things on top of that, right? You can start
Right.
to jump around. You can, and people don't get mad because it's play.
Right. Because it's play. Right. Let's do this. Let's take another quick break, and let's talk a little bit more about that play when we come back from the break.
Okay.
We'll be right back. At Harmonious Workplaces, we believe work should provide purpose, satisfaction, and growth. We empower people to thrive by fostering environments where individuals can find meaning in their work and organizations can succeed through thoughtful, well-executed strategies. We're committed to making work better for the people who do it and the leaders who guide them. To discover how Harmonious Workplaces can impact your organization, visit www.harmoniousworkplaces.com and book a free 30-minute information session with one of our consultants today. Again, that's www.harmoniousworkplaces.com. And we're back and talking with Rachel about play in the workplace. And Cheryl, you had a question that you were going to bring up here.
I did. Thank you. Rachel, I was wondering if we could touch lightly again on the idea of play, and is it just a matter of semantics, and is it a hurdle to get people to understand how you're bringing it into the workplace? And if that is a challenge because of semantics, when people hear the word play, they think of childhood meandering or a useless pursuit, and they don't think it's appropriate at work. Is this what you meant about you wish it isn't a matter of semantics,
Right.
that it wasn't.
So you've hit on a couple of different aspects there. Because on one hand, um, free thinking is very hard for a lot of people to do, right? Everybody is familiar with the term brainstorming. And if you've actually sat in a room with people trying to brainstorm, you know how completely you don't feel like that's very useful,
Can
right?
be hard to get going. That's right.
That's
Especially
true.
Right?
especially in environments where there's no psychological safety. We danced all
Mhm.
around it, just going to say it out loud. But please continue.
Right.
Continue on your
Wh-
thought.
Which is one of the reasons that play is actually a better uh, premise. Because
Mm,
if you tell people we're just going to play for a little bit here, and there's no right now. If you have to introduce it that way, you got a problem, okay? Because people won't ever believe you if you say that. Because people they've already done the thing that you don't want them to do, right? They're starting to assess, going, I don't know, right? So instead, I don't do any of that. I I often just say, "Can we talk about Goldilocks? Or can we just talk about, and so I'll bring in a fairy tale character, and I
mm,
purposely bring in a fairy tale character because I purposely want them to completely go back to childhood, to not remember the details, right?
mhm,
Knowing that
mhm.
it is of no consequence. There's no way to get it right. There's no way to get it wrong.
You'll often hear leaders say there are no bad ideas to open a brainstorming session, but everybody knows that they could certainly present a bad idea and they will be judged. But what you're doing is you're taking it one step further and you're taking your audience all the way back to childhood with the connection to something like a nursery rhyme. It's great.
That's exactly
It's
right.
great.
Not a fairy tale. Probably with a nursery rhyme. I never try it with one, but that doesn't mean
Right.
anything. Um, but
Fairy tale.
the
Sure.
the point is, the entire point of the exercise and the entire point of play, when it's working, is that you begin to discover, to shut off the voice in your head, that all the things that you are thinking about other people are not true.
Mm,
There are surprises that what you might think as a stupid idea, or that what you might everybody knows, you discover very quickly, nope, that is not consistent with what everybody else is thinking at this moment.
sure.
Neat.
And you
Sure.
need to go get them to a place that has, like, a fairy tale, because it's childhood. The associations to that, there's somewhat they're often very universal. I mean, I've done these experiments in large group settings and found that even things that I kind of looked around when I began to do the going, oh my God, we have all these multinationals in here. I don't know that this is going to work. This idea, because I, at the time, yeah, the Columbus was what I used to talk about,
Oh,
um,
yep.
because
Right.
Columbus was, it literally is the way people know the Columbus is a fairy tale, right? They know
Right.
the little nursery rhyme. And what's interesting about it is that anybody who comes to study in the United States, they have to learn U.S. history, and they used to have to learn about Columbus to be able to pass their language test or whatever else they were passing. Those were part of the test. I don't know that that's true
Sure.
anymore. But my point being that the greatest thing that happens when you're playing is the discovery of the misassumptions, that there
Oh,
is else that other people know that you didn't know they knew.
Sure. Sure.
Um, there's a team that I've been kind of informally advising that I just started with, and they are doing work in workplace hiring. And one of the things that they recognize is that there's an awful lot of social chatter that, like you're sitting in a meeting and somebody does something and you're going, oh my God, they are really good at that. Who knew they were so good at that? So you don't even
Hmm.
recognize, because too much of the boundedness of organizational tasks, uh, even just, this podcast, I'm doing it on my phone, right? And most people, they're in Zoom calls today. They can't really see the full environment, and they certainly don't get a full sense of the person and their capability. So when somebody
Sure.
does something that they didn't even know they could do, you're like, wow, look at that, right?
Hmm.
And it's that amazement, that appreciation that gets really sticky for people. And so play gives people that opportunity to show those other aspects of the things that they love, because they're not going to play at something they don't like.
Right.
It's
And by
play.
in,
Beautifully put.
mm,
Beautifully put. Yeah,
and by introducing the universality, even in a room full of multinational people, you can bring everyone to that place.
for sure.
Yeah, that's great, Rachel.
Great. Hey, Rachel, as we kind of wrap up here, can you tell everybody how they can learn more and interact with you? Can you give us uh, your kind of elevator pitch and how we can contact you?
Okay, so my elevator pitch, if I was good at it, would it would be different. But I can tell you that the things that I'm most about are leadership and the the pathways to that, about readiness, resourcefulness, and resiliency.
Mm,
Because if you are investing in those three aspects in your organization, play is a great way to do that, to get going, but it won't be the lasting thing. And the other thing is that it's fundamental to business strategy. And so if you want help with your business strategy, or you want to learn readiness, resiliency, and resourcefulness, and how that actually is going to contribute to better performance in your organization. Now, I do have a website and I'm on LinkedIn. So, um,
awesome.
and I'm very blessed that my father, being the creative genius he was, he used to always ask me, what else are you thinking? Whenever I would come to him and say, I want blah, blah, blah. And he would say, well, why did you decide that? And, I would say, this is what I'm thinking about. This is what, and he says, what else are you thinking? So he'd always get me to go to that third place, right?
Mm.
I think going to the third place is always a very valuable exercise. And what he did was he changed his name from being, um, to the he anglicized the name that was his father's name when he came. So the name
Mm,
Kaberon, anybody who you on is a direct relative. There are no other
it-
Kaberons. So it's if you can remember Kaberon, Kab as in boy, Eron, you'll find.
right on.
I would also like to add, did your father help you brainstorm your company name? Because I want everyone to know it's RKARKAY. But if you think of Rachel's initials, it will also get you.
That's exactly right. And in fact, he did, because my parents were Louis and Louisa. Kaberon. So they were the LK combine. That was my father. So it was ELKAY.
There
So
you
he
go.
taught us quickly. he understood that the dictionary in the old days of the yellow pages, right?
Okay.
How you spelled things mattered.
Mattered for
It
sure.
Matters.
really
For
mattered.
Very
sure
So
did.
important.
I learned very quickly that RK, if I spelled it with an A, would be at the top of the list.
There you go. Right
Right.
on.
And
Strategy
KA
at its
is the
best.
first of the Ks often.
Great.
Nice.
There you go.
Awesome.
Well, thank you.
Thank you
And
for
thank you
asking,
so much.
Daryl. And this was such a joy. I'd be happy to do it again.
Awesome. We'd love to have you.
Thanks, Rachel. This was very,
Wonderful.
Thanks,
very
man.
fun.
All
Good.
right. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. And with all of that, I think that's a wrap, folks. So we will make sure that we put Rachel's contact information in the show notes. And until we meet again, make change your friend.
Oh, I like it. I like it.
Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find Harmonious Workplaces on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and other streaming platforms. We'd love any feedback on whatever channel you find us on. Please rate, like, and share our podcast with your network, and remember to add Harmonious Workplaces to your list of favorites to get notified about each new episode. To contact Rich or Cheryl, please visit www.workbalanceconsulting.com. To connect with Ben, find him on LinkedIn or visit at www.harborsidestrategy.com.